Hello dear, and welcome to Celestial Sleep, a brittle map, browned at the edges by time and war. Lay under glass in a museum no one visited anymore, Istanbul, 1929. A low-ranking archivist stumbled upon it while cataloguing Ottoman naval relics. At first, it seemed ordinary until he noticed something impossible. The coastline of South America was fairly accurate. So, was the coast of Africa? But the southernmost stretch where only ocean should have been showed land. A jagged terrain under the sea, mountains, rivers, cold, but not frozen. Antarctica. Without ice. The Piri-Reis map, nearly 500 years old, created in an age when humans couldn't even sail that far south. The map had charted Antarctica not as a frozen wasteland but in remarkable detail, as if it had been surveyed from the sky. For decades, historians dismissed it. Anomalies, they said. Artistic liberties. But one woman refused to accept coincidence. Dr. Elara Miles. She had built her career in the respected halls of Oxford debunking historical forgeries and tracking ancient cartographic hoaxes. But the more she studied the Piri-Reis map, the more the doubts grew inside her. Not about the map, but about everything else. Why did multiple ancient maps, some thousands of years apart, depict near-identical coastlines? How was it that they aligned with such uncanny precision to modern satellite scans? And why, when looking deeper, did so many of them contain hidden notations in a forgotten language? One no expert could translate? That was 3 years ago. Now, her name was whispered in forums and underground podcasts as a digital archaeologist and explorer, a forbidden history. Her research had been discredited, her funding pulled. But Elara didn't stop, not after what she found in Antarctica. The coordinates weren't easy to locate. Hidden within the margins of the Piri-Reis map, among faded compass roses and old sailor scribbles, was a cluster of symbols. They looked like stains, but framed just right. They formed a pattern, a geodetic triangle that pointed directly beneath the polar ice shelf. When a private climate study stumbled upon magnetic anomalies in the same region, Elara knew it wasn't a mistake. She assembled a quiet team, not scientists, explorers, divers, climbers, cryptographers, people who believed in the impossible. With them, she made the journey south in complete secrecy. What they found was not a continent. It was a vault, carved deep in the frozen black stone beneath the ice. The structure pulsed with a faint warmth. It wasn't made by ice or wind. It was engineered. Smooth tunnels bored into bedrock. Engravings older than language. Sculptures of human hands. With 6 fingers inside the vault were no records. No scrolls. No gold. Just a small, perfectly preserved map. Not of Earth as it is, but Earth as it once was. Before the sea swallowed coastlines. Before jungles overtook stone cities. Before deserts turned to silence. And in the corner, the same notations found on the Piri-Reis map, symbols arranged as a star constellation, Orion. And beneath it, written in a language no human should be able to read, was a name. Genesis 0. This was no myth, no coincidence. This was not the lost city of a single culture. This was the first civilization, the original architects of Earth's forgotten history. And somehow they had designed their own extinction to leave behind a trail of knowledge. For anyone clever or desperate enough to follow it, Elara stepped back into the snow-blind air, the map gripped tightly in her hand. Somewhere across distant sands and frozen peaks, others were waiting. Clues scattered across the planet. Waiting to be found, waiting for us to remember. Elara stood at the edge of the Giza Plateau just before dawn, her boots sinking into the ancient sand as the sun began its slow crawl over the horizon. In the shadows of the Great Pyramid, she wasn't alone. Tourists would swarm the grounds in a few hours, but for now, it was just her, the wind, and the weight of history pressing down from all directions. This wasn't a sightseeing trip. 36 hours earlier, she had received an encrypted file from a private contact in Cairo, a disgruntled ministry worker who claimed to have found something beneath the Sphinx, something never before documented. The email contained only 2 things: a blurry image of what looked like a chamber door and 6 words. It hums when no one's near. To anyone else, it might have been a hoax. To Elara, it was the missing piece. Giza had always been more than pyramids. The structures were tuned, aligned with jaw-dropping mathematical precision to true north. Star constellations and each other. The Pyramid of Khufu was no tomb. It was a message, and if you knew how to read it, it pointed somewhere much older. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. A temple buried under earth until its discovery in the 1990s. 12,000 years old. Twice the age of Stonehenge. No writing, no iron tools, just massive stone pillars carved with animals and symbols. And perfect astronomical alignment. How could people from 10,000 BCE align a temple with the exact midpoint of the Milky Way? Elara had stood there months ago, wind slicing across the Anatolian plains, tracing her fingers over the strange symbols etched into the stone. One particular carving had haunted her since, a vulture holding a circle, surrounded by other creatures, all facing a scorpion. Astronomers now believed it depicted a celestial event, a date, buried in symbolism, 10,950 BCE. The same date the Piri-Reis coordinates traced back to. Different continents, different cultures, same precision. Someone was building something global. Or rather, someone had ELARA now crept past the tourist boundaries, moving along a narrow path between the Sphinx's paws, worn down by erosion far older than the statue itself. That had always bothered her. If the Sphinx was built around 2500 BCE, what caused the rainfall erosion? Egypt wasn't a wet climate, not for thousands of years, unless the Sphinx predated even the pharaohs. Under the cover of darkness, she removed a loose panel near the left side, a hole once claimed to be just a drainage shaft. It wasn't. She descended slowly, flashlight bouncing off smooth limestone walls. 15 feet down, the walls changed. A different stone, darker, colder. Older. Then she found it. The door, a slab of black basalt, smooth as glass, humming with a low frequency that made her jaw ache. This was no construction. This was engineered. Embedded at its center was a symbol she'd now seen in 3 different places, the circular pattern, from Göbekli Tepe. A mark on the crystal tablet in Peru, and now, here as if they were parts of the same sentence. Broken apart and hidden for millennia. Something shifted, the hum stopped. The door clicked, and slowly began to open. Inside, not a burial tomb, not treasure. A room of geometry. The walls were etched with star alignments, maps of Earth's magnetic grid, diagrams of pyramids across the globe, and in the center, a stone tablet depicting the Earth surrounded by 12 smaller globes, each marked with a unique symbol. One of them, unmistakably, was Mars. Elara stepped inside, heart pounding. This wasn't just a chamber. It was a message hub, a decoder, a world map, built by the first civilization, and as light swept across one of the walls, words glowed faintly in the stone, words in that same unknowable language from the Antarctic vault. But she didn't need to translate them. She already knew what they said. The stars remember. So, will you? Now it was undeniable. Giza was not a beginning. It was part of a global system, a blueprint, a warning. And someone, long ago, had tried to preserve the truth in stone, but it would not stay buried forever. The pyramids were waking. The cave pulsed with a rhythm no human could hear. Deep beneath the heart of India, miles from any known tourist map, Elara descended into the ancient galleries of the Bhimbetka rock shelters. She moved carefully, flashlight scanning over prehistoric paintings, red ochre animals, handprints, hunters carved into stone. But tonight, she wasn't here to study what was visible. She was here for what was hidden. 3 weeks ago, while cross-referencing astronomical alignments from Giza and Göbekli Tepe, Elara discovered something peculiar. Several ancient sites followed not just stars but sound. More specifically, they responded to frequencies resonating through specific minerals. Acoustic engineering, on a scale no primitive civilization should have mastered. And yet, the caves in Bhimbetka bore traces. Elara paused outside a newly sealed chamber, marked by a triangular red symbol on the stone. Not official. Someone else had been here, Just as she reached for the panel, her comm crackled in her ear. "Elara, come in. We're picking up readings. Frequencies spiking inside the cave, unheard range. Be careful." She clicked to mute, too late to turn back now. With a slow breath, she pushed open the narrow rock passageway. The light on her wrist flared, the stone around her reacting to the temperature or her presence. Maybe both. She descended, oxygen thinning, stone falling away into darkness until finally, the tunnel opened into a dome. What lay inside should not have existed. A sculpture, or rather, a mechanism, stood in the center of the circular chamber, towering, made from a type of polished black crystalline stone that shimmered like obsidian in water. But it was seamless. No tool marks, no erosion, no joints like it had been poured into place. Around it, indecipherable symbols spiraled outward on the floor, forming concentric rings that pulsed under her light. Signs of technology. Real technology. A machine in the cave, left behind by the first civilization. Elara whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't art, it's a reactor." She didn't mean nuclear, at least not by today's standards. But something about the way the chamber curved, the way the air itself seemed to hum in patterns, said the machine was still sleeping and maybe, just maybe, it could wake up. She approached slowly, reaching out a hand toward the glassy surface. The moment her fingers brushed it, the spiral rings glowed and a tone, soft, low, like the drone of an ancient bell, filled the room. Then came the pulse, a wave of sound, like a shockwave without force, passed through her body, echoing in her bones, her teeth, the back of her skull. And then, something strange. A vision, not a hallucination, not a dream, a flash, cities carved into clouds, pillars of light connecting mountains, people, humans, standing tall in robes of metal, their hands emitting frequencies to move monoliths like toys. A voice speaking in her mind. The memory is not gone, only locked. When the vision faded, Elara stumbled backward against the wall, gasping. The machine had shown her something, a piece of the past, or maybe instructions for the future. Retrieving her satellite transmitter, she uploaded a scan of the chamber back to her team. The machine's structure mirrored something they'd seen elsewhere, half a world away, buried inside the base of the Kailasa Temple, cut from a single mountain rock in Maharashtra. The Kailasa Temple was another impossible structure, built top-down with no blueprints and no construction records. Historians called it an architectural miracle. Elara now knew better. It wasn't just a temple, it was a shell, a protective casing around something much, much older. She boarded a train the next morning, one step closer to confirming the grand design. What they'd thought were religious monuments weren't mere dedications to gods, they were nodes, terminals, battery housings, a planetary power grid. And now, two of them had activated. The first civilization hadn't just existed. They'd encoded energy into Earth itself, sound, stone, magnetism, all talking to each other through time. And across this ancient communication network, someone or something had just responded. Water didn't belong there, not that deep in the Sahara, but the mud was wet fresh as if it had rained. A small miracle in the heart of the desert. Yet for Elara, it wasn't a miracle. It was confirmation. The eye of the Sahara, also called the Richard structure, stretched nearly 30 miles across the Mauritanian desert. From above, it looked like an enormous bullseye carved into the earth, spiraling rings of erosion that made no geological sense. Officially, it was labeled a natural formation, but it wasn't. Not anymore. Elara, the drone's down. Her assistant radioed from the ridge. Battery fried. That's the third one. Something's interfering again. Electromagnetic spikes. Fourth anomaly in 6 weeks. Whatever lay beneath the Richard structure wasn't natural. No magnetite, no storm systems. But buried deep in the earth, something was resonating, pulsing like a heartbeat. And now, leaking water. Elara stood on the lip of the ancient formation, holding up one of the stone shards they found just minutes ago, black, melted, glossy, like volcanic glass but cold to the touch. Embedded in its center was a familiar pattern, a set of lines forming a triple spiral. The same symbol found deep beneath the Great Pyramid. The pieces were arranging themselves. Plato had called it fiction. Atlantis, he wrote, was a city beyond the Pillars of Hercules, richer and more advanced than any civilization before or since, until it vanished beneath the sea in a single day and night. Until recently, most scholars dismissed it as a metaphor, but none of them had ever seen this spiral from orbit. NASA had, quietly, satellites, caught glimpses through desert storms, showing not just the concentric circles of the Richard structure, but shadows beneath the sand, rectilinear, to precise. The structure predated dynastic Egypt, even older than the supposed extinction event at the end of the Younger Dryas, around 11,600 BCE. Alara believed Atlantis wasn't a myth. It was a memory, real and buried. And now, waking up, infrared is picking up a chamber called Baleem, her geoscanner, from a nearby slope. 10 meters down, solid walls, something metallic inside. Alara's heart jumped. They dug with tools hands, anything they could until their gloves blistered. The chamber wasn't large, only the size of a single room. But when they cracked open the final layer, the air that escaped was pressurized, preserved. Inside. The structure felt more like a cockpit than a tomb. There were control panels, smooth grooves in black material that lit faintly under their hands, resonating impulses like echoing sonar. The chamber's walls acted like a globe, projecting the outside desert. And then, without warning, the image changed. The sound faded. The rings reconstructed. Water surged through the channels like veins, feeding vibrant ecosystems. Towers of gold, obsidian, and white sandstone rose from the image. Latticed walkways connecting buildings like branches of coral. A radiant city surrounded by orbiting disks. Not ancient. Advanced. And then a voice, low, harmonic, not in words but tones that formed ideas in their minds. We were the last sanctuary, the final memory. Images flooded the chamber. Earth long ago, lusher, greener, populated by multiple advanced societies whose technology mimicked nature. Then the star grew closer. Not a sun but something else, either a cosmic impact or a weapon. Cities ignited into flame. Oceans surged. Atlantis had not simply fallen. It had been sacrificed. A deliberate erasure. And the survivors escaped in every direction. Some underground, some to distant mountains, others off-world. The eye had been their last echo, a memory encoded in the most durable language they knew, geometry. Alara stepped forward, breath fogging the cold metallic surface. There, in the center of the room, a globe rotated slowly, earth covered in dozens of glowing points, each one marking a known ancient site. But now, one more had lit up beneath it. Beneath the Pacific Ocean. Coordinates appeared, longitude, latitude. The Mariana Trench. Another vault. Another clue. Before they could speak it aloud, the lights dimmed. The chamber sealed. The memory faded. But what they had seen couldn't be unseen. Atlantis was real. It was never a legend. Never a single continent. It was a civilization. A network. A puzzle stretched across centuries and continents, and someone had hidden the final key in a place humanity would never casually reach. The deepest part of the ocean. The first civilization had scattered. Their secrets at the ends of the earth, and Alara had just been handed a map. They said it couldn't be built today. Not with diamond-tipped tools, not with cranes, not with satellites or supercomputers. The stone walls of Sacsayhuaman rose behind Alara like the ramparts of a forgotten god. Their interlocked blocks, weighing up to 200 tons apiece, each carved to fit its neighbors, without a hairline of space between. No mortar, no seams, not even a wedge could pass between them. Look at this, her local guide whispered, running a flashlight along the base of one of the blocks. It's like butter, melted and molded. Alara crouched, observing the wear. There were no chisel marks, no fractures. The curves were too smooth, the angles too complex. The stones didn't just fit, they locked. Like puzzle pieces, like machine parts, like someone had softened stone as if it were clay. then pressed them into place with geometry only a superintelligence could understand. And Sacsayhuaman wasn't the only anomaly. Days earlier, at Pumapunku in Bolivia, they discovered H-shaped stones precision-carved from andesite granite so hard that even diamond blades struggled against it. Holes drilled with perfect symmetry, grooves cut with laser-like perfection, structures apparently blasted apart by sudden force, scattered like a spilled box of engineered stone bricks. But Alara had seen something else. When placed under ultraviolet light, several of the stones revealed faint carvings invisible to the naked eye, symbols eerily similar to those she had seen in the Antarctic chamber. And under the Sphinx, they were fingerprints, not literal ones but technological signatures, guides, calibration marks, as if the builders had been preparing these sites to interact with something active. What exactly were they preparing for? That answer waited thousands of miles across the Pacific. Easter Island. The journey there was quiet. Her team was growing used to the feeling now a hollow silence before each discovery, like the world was holding its breath. Alara stepped onto the grassy slopes of Rapa Nui just before dawn. The Moai statues stared down from their stone platforms, their backs to the ocean, as if guarding the island from something long gone or long buried. It had taken decades for researchers to acknowledge the Moai had full bodies, buried beneath the earth, many completely intact. But Alara wasn't interested in the statues above ground. She was here for what lay beneath them, following local legends and seismic scans. The team excavated a narrow passage beneath one of the lesser-known statues in the island's interior. Several hours into the dig, the stone gave way to a shaft descending deeper than any known cave on the island. Metal, not stone, reinforced the walls, a forgotten chamber. Inside, there was no gold, no bones, no idols. There was only a tablet. Crystal, circular, suspended in the air by invisible force, completely motionless. As Alara stepped forward, it blinked. Just once, then it activated. The chamber flickered with light not from any source visible to her eyes, but within her mind. A 3D holographic globe formed over the crystal, Earth bathed in energy lines. Dozens of points glowed as if tethered by magnetic filaments, a web of ancient sites: Giza, Göbekli, Tepe, Bimbetka, Sacsayhuaman, Stonehenge, others deep beneath the sea. Each location pulsed like a heartbeat. One by one, they began to connect. Elara watched, stunned, as golden lines asked across the globe in real time. The lines didn't represent trade routes. They weren't just geometric alignments. They were functioning conduits, a planetary circuit. The ancients hadn't just built isolated monuments. They had created a global energy system, powered by sound, resonance, and perhaps even human consciousness. The structures aligned with telluric currents, Earth's natural energy lines, and the statues, the temples, the stones. They acted as routers, receivers, conductors. She'd once dismissed the Earth grid theory, the idea that ancient monuments formed a global pattern, based on sacred geometries. But this was no theory. It was a power grid, a planetary device engineered to operate as a machine the size of the Earth. Suddenly, the tablet began to react. At its center, the crystal displayed a ripple, a glitch in the pattern, a new signal activating. A flare lit up near the western ridge of China. Another signal emerged from somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. One more from Russia's frozen tundra. The grid was activating, one site at a time, as if waiting for enough pieces to fall into place. As if it was preparing to turn on. Alara backed away from the glowing orb, mind racing. Who? What had built all this? And more importantly, what had they built it for? Because if this truly was an ancient planetary machine, then the first civilization hadn't just left behind ruins. They had left behind a system that was starting to wake up. The ice groaned like a living thing. 1,000 feet above, snowstorms howled across the surface of Greenland. But down here in the yawning blackness beneath the ice sheet, there was no wind, no light, and no sign of time. Just ancient cold pressing in from every direction, and the rhythmic thrum of something that should not exist. Alara's breath fogged against her visor as her team rappelled the final icy drop into what could only be described as a vault. Not natural, not man-made, not man-anything. The walls were impossibly smooth, curved like the inside of a metallic seashell. Lines along the surface pulsed faintly with cobalt blue light in, but unmistakably alive. Her gloved hand brushed the alloy warm alive. "This isn't a chamber," she whispered into her comms. "It's a pod, and it's powered. Then why is it still running?" The Leem asked. "It's been under the ice for 12,000 years. They all knew the implications. The Younger Dryas event, the same sudden climatic catastrophe that had triggered mass extinctions and wiped out complex life around 10,800 BC, lined up exactly with what they were seeing. Climate data, impact craters, melt layers. The first civilization hadn't just vanished, it had been erased. And now, Alara stood at the edge of their black box. 2 days earlier, a private research satellite owned by a decommissioned NASA subcontractor detected a geothermal spike beneath Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier. Officially dismissed as volcanic activity. Unofficially, it had triggered a code red among a few scientists who had seen similar readings 20 years before. In Antarctica. Of them all, only one lived to talk about it, an older astrophysicist named Maren Dorver. Alara had spoken to her 3 nights ago. The stars were wrong the day it activated. Dr. Dorver said, voice barely above a whisper, "I was there. The readings didn't come from Earth. They matched a frequency we recorded decades earlier from deep space. I believe whatever's under the ice received something." Alara hadn't slept since. Now, inside the frozen vault, she watched a shimmer unfold across the pod's interior. Words not human, yet suddenly legible, began writing themselves in glowing arcs above her head. The language was the same one found beneath the Sphinx in the cave reactor in India, and encoded in the structure under Easter Island. But this time, the message wasn't fragmented. This time, it was direct. Cycle terminated. Capsule active. Memory lock partial. She slowly turned toward the center of the chamber. There was a shape organic, coiled, neither machine nor flesh. It floated in liquid, suspended, preserved. Not a body, not quite. A bio-device. Alara's jaw clenched. It resembled a fetal form, small, humanoid, but with elongated features and fine networked lines along its skull. Not alien, but not fully human either. Hybrid. "Are we looking at one of them?" whispered Jovan, her biologist, voice full of disbelief, or, Alara corrected, what they became. This wasn't a person. It was a memory vessel, a hard drive of consciousness, knowledge, emotion, language, stored biologically, waiting for the right trigger, waiting for someone who could awaken it. Someone cinched to the frequency of the Earth grid. Suddenly, the walls of the room shifted. The vault began projecting a shifting hologram across the inside of the chamber, a spinning model of the Earth as viewed from orbit. But it wasn't today's Earth. Glaciers pulled back, oceans receded, deserts turned green, then cities towering, crystalline structures emerged in clusters across the continents. Iceland, Western China, what would become Brazil? And under the sea, massive aquatic domes with ringed edges pulsed with light. Then came the decline. The skies darkened. A massive celestial body asked across the solar simulation, a comet or asteroid trailing fire. Not one, but many. Meteor showers slammed Earth. Oceans boiled. Lights went out. But before the final impact, dozens of vaults just like this one were sealed, marked with the same glowing glyph, Genesis Protocol. Initiate. Alara's heart pounded in her ears. They knew it was coming. They planned for it. A sudden chime rang out. The stasis pod pulse slowed. The glacier above them shifted, something vibrating against the vault's electromagnetic shield. A signal. Satellite feed just went dark. One of her techs radioed. Unexplained outages across the northern hemisphere. And get this, Earth's magnetosphere just wobbled. Wobbled? Alara echoed. Then the realization hit her. It wasn't just this vault waking up. It was all of them. The speech above her head shifted again. External pattern recognized. Reconnection sequence engaged. Another symbol appeared. one she hadn't seen since Egypt. But this time it contained something new, a countdown. She stared at it, breath caught in her throat. 20-5 days. And then, underneath, just one word, remember. The Earth grid wasn't. Offline. It was booting up and reaching out for the only species left that might still understand how to use it. Humanity. Ready or not, Elara stepped hesitantly into the edge of Hoya-Baciu, Romania's most haunted forest, a place infamous for vanishings. Lights in the trees and a clearing where nothing grows. Locals avoided it. Scientists dismissed it. Paranormal files labeled it a mystery wrapped in superstition. But none of them had seen what Elara now held in her hand. A stone disc, retrieved from the Greenland vault during the final exit. One that glowed softly in certain frequencies and even more eerily reacted to language. Not just spoken words but written symbols. When she passed over a carved surface with ancient markings, the disc would begin to pulse softly first, then more rapidly if it recognized the shape. It wasn't just a relic. It was a translator. And it had led her here, to Hoya-Baciu, where no ancient ruins were known to exist, and no records hinted of past civilizations, but deep in the forest, inside the infamous clearing that GPS refused to map, the disc came alive. 10 paces in, it began pulsing. 20 paces, and it emitted sound. By the time she reached the dead center of the overgrown anomaly, the pulse had synced to her heartbeat. Then, it happened. The tablet she carried from Easter Island back in episode 5, the one that had displayed the world energy grid, lit up on its own for the first time since activation. A new node emerged on the map, not beneath her feet. Below them. Found something. Beline's voice crackled through the static. Scanner just picked up a void, cylindrical, has depth but no material. It's like the data stops. Elara brushed her hand along the ground. The dirt was carved, not recently. Lines crisscrossed the surface down to the centimeter-perfect geometries covered in moss and root. Patterns similar to those found in Armenia's ancient observatories, spirals, concentric circles. 12-point starbursts. It wasn't random. It was language, but no known dialect. Not Sumerian, not Proto-Indo-European. Not even the hybrid tongues discovered in vaults across the globe. This was something else, an artificial mathematical language, encoded not in words, but ratios and frequencies, instructions. Not sentences. Openers. That night, back in their temporary Romanian base, Elara met with Dr. Ray Komora, a symbologist and neurolinguist, who had been breaking down the repeating patterns found across all the discovered sites. I don't think we were meant to read the symbols, Komora said as she tapped through projection footage. Not read. Not like sentences. They're waveform formulas, blueprints for generating harmonics, infrasound chords and light frequencies. They're for machines? Elara asked. Maybe once, Komora said, but I think they were also for... She hesitated. Us. Elara frowned. The builders? No. Komura replied. Us. Now, she pulled up comparative scans from the Sphinx chamber, Göbekli Tepe, and beneath the K-Lhasa temple. Every site contained at least one instance of what she called the language of the forgotten diagrams. So, universal. They were found across multiple millennia and cultures that had never supposedly met. The symbols speak across time. Komura continued. It's as if they were waiting until our brains evolved enough to understand them. Elara stared at the data, or until we built the right machines to help us hear it. Silence. And then, the impossible happened. As their discussion continued. The AI linguistics software running in the background, an experimental neural network, known as THOTH pinged. It had synthesized a phrase, a full translation, projected on the screen in golden letters. We dreamed in builders. We slept in stone. Time called. We echo home. Before either could react, the second translation followed. A warning. The message was not meant for all. Only the rememberers. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The crystal tablet pulsed once more without input. And then, time shifted. Not years, not days. Minutes. Ray Komura vanished. Gone mid-sentence. Elara and one technician were the only ones who noticed. The video feed of their conversation looped 5 seconds, then cut. The log showed no connection to Komura's device. Gone. Then, 7 minutes later, she reappeared, collapsed in the center of the room, eyes wide. She'd been somewhere else, I saw. Komura whispered, shaking. I saw the structures in the sky, cities anchored to nothing, voices without mouths, and one of them said, "We're late." Elara crouched beside her, gripping her trembling hands. They called us the Rememberers. Ray said, and they've been waiting. Elara looked at the disk in her jacket pocket, now dim. Either the message was almost complete, or whatever had sent it had just returned. A flash, no thunder, no explosion, just light. For exactly 4.2 seconds, an aurora lit the skies over the American Midwest at high noon. Green, purple, blue. Then gone. It wasn't solar activity. NASA confirmed no flare, no coronal mass ejection. But for those who knew what to look for, the pattern wasn't random. It was coordinates, entangled particles reacting to something being activated on Earth, and possibly far beyond it, deep in a Colorado lab buried beneath the Rockies. Elara replayed the satellite footage again and again. There, she pointed, pausing the feed. The beams, one flare, 12 seconds apart. It matches the star map we pulled from Armenia. Belim leaned over the monitor, his voice low. That's the Earth alignment from 10,800 BCE. They stared at each other, the exact sky repeating now that the first civilization had witnessed in the final moments. Before the world burned, the evidence had been trickling in for months. Blackened layers in prehistoric soil near the Great Lakes, nanodiamonds in Greenland, melt glass in Syria. Thousands of years ago, the sky burned, the rivers flash-boiled, and massive animal species vanished overnight. The Younger Dryas impact theory, once fringe science, now had irrefutable evidence. The Earth had been hit by something, a swarm of fragments from a shattered comet, the same constellation behind every ancient myth of fire from the heavens. Every culture had remembered it differently. The Sumerians called it the Wrath of Enlil. The Egyptians, the Spear of Rodot. The Mayans said the sky broke open. And the Hopi? They said it happened before the previous world crumbled. Elara stood next to what shouldn't have existed. A holographic celestial map projected from a three-sided artifact unearthed beneath Utah's canyons. Not built by First Nations tribes, something older. The artifact lit up with the same sequence as the global GRID in previous sites. But this time, it showed not just Earth, it showed Earth being targeted. They knew the impact was coming. Elara said, voice barely holding steady, more than that. Belim replied, they tried to stop it. Fallen sites across the globe: Atlantis, the Richard Crater, Sundaland, even the now-submerged city off the coast of Yanaguni. Japan, all dated to the same cataclysmic moment, roughly 12,000 years ago. And satellite scans now showed structural shielding remnants beneath the ocean floor. Massive stone or metallic arches buried by sediment. Likely planetary-scale deflectors or resonance gates, failed defenses. Shattered relics of a civilization that had reached for the stars and been struck down by the heavens. But then, why all the messages? Why leave behind the grid, the machines, the constructed monoliths and sleeping technologies? Unless this was a memory capsule, Elara murmured, a safety deposit box. They knew they couldn't stop it, so they encoded what we would need next time. Komura, still pale from her temporal episode in Romania, joined them. I ran another cross-translation through Thoth, she said. The Orion alignment wasn't just a time stamp, it's a cycle trigger. A what? Belim asked. Komura pointed to the animated star fields. Every 12,000 years, Earth hits the same resonance window: planetary tilt, solar movement, magnetic flux. It's a cosmic reset button. Every time the sky burns, the same pattern re-emerges. These texts, these vaults, they were designed to wake up when the world entered the signal range again. We just entered the window. Elara whispered. The projection zoomed out. Not just Earth, Venus, Mars, even Luna, our own moon. all her dormant alignments, similar relic fields unexamined, all waking up. And the countdown initiated from Greenland days ago was accelerating. 25 days had become 23. A spiral of catastrophes already unfurling, volcanic anomalies in Iceland, unexplained animal behavior near the magnetic poles, and strangest of all, growing reports of people dreaming in perfect unison. Dreams of fire, of collapse, of symbols etched in the sky, the same symbols Alara had spent her life decoding. But this time, they came with a voice, you were warned, from beneath the sands of Mesopotamia. New cuneiform tablets surfaced during a flash floodnut, after being buried for who knows how long, and written among them, in flawless Akkadian, the stars will remember what the earth tries to forget. More warnings, or invitations. Elara now understood the tragic truth. The first civilization had built a planetary defense network not of weapons, but knowledge, memory. They hadn't expected to survive, but they expected us to, if we were smart enough, connected enough, to wake up in time. The voice returned, echoing in their systems, their dreams. The last skyfire ended the architects, the next ends the inheritors. Alara stared at the countdown still, ticking. The Earth grid half awake. The planetary memory vault still locked. The sky was trying to speak. Again. And the clock was running out. Not, metaphorically, audibly. A tremor beneath the range of normal human hearing, shaking the instruments in labs around the world. A low-frequency resonance that puzzled geophysicists, terrified conspiracy theorists, and to Alara, confirmed what she feared most. The awakening wasn't coming. It was already here. Reports began pouring in from across the planet. Strange vibrations beneath ancient sites. Magnetic surges disabling drones over Machu Picchu. Power outages not from human grids, but from something interfering beneath them. Then came the light. In 3 corners of the globe, Angkor Wat, the Olmec ruins of La Venta, and the underground tunnels near Turkey's Derinkuyu teams witnessed the impossible. At the exact same moment, ancient carvings glowing in synchronicity, patterns of light forming an identical sequence, a sequence that matched a single word, awake. Alara stood at the nerve center of the control tent, watching satellites track the pulses around the globe. Every ancient site she had visited, and many she hadn't, now drawing invisible lines through the sky like a web being spun in reverse. What are they doing? Asked Baleem, staring at the data streams like they might catch fire. They're sensing, Alara said softly, and more chilling responding. The planetary system built by the first civilization was running its ultimate protocol, reconnecting. But to what? That question was answered just hours later, in the silence above the Earth. The International Space Station, after receiving and transmitting, recorded patterns from the newly activated sites, picked up something behind the moon. A shadow, not a ship, not debris, a construct, large, geometric, non-rotating, hidden in a shadowed orbit for possibly millennia. A void that absorbed radar but reflected natural sunlight in spectral glints across certain orbits, glints matching the material found in the vault beneath the Greenland ice sheet. The first civilization hadn't just activated Earth's power grid. They were reconnecting to something off-world, a relay, a server, a forgotten node, or a doorway. Alara's team ran the numbers. Every site activated on a precise timing cycle based on Earth's shifting orientation and the orbital position of the shadow above the lunar far side, like dials falling into alignment on a lock. Only now they realized. Earth was the key. The sites weren't just remembering, they were sending a signal. Komura, still reassembling fragments of the harmonics-based language, translated one of the full phrases now appearing simultaneously in multiple sites. The gate does not open until the answer is felt. Not spoken, Komura explained. Felt. It's emotion, intuition, consciousness. That's what the grid's waiting for. Not a code, but a frequency generated by us. You didn't just activate it. You had to resonate with it. Alara's fingers tightened around the crystal spiral key recovered from the Easter Island node. Her own biometric data had already triggered reactions in the Bimbetka cave. Was it genetic memory, ancestry, or was there some part of the human brain, the forgotten empathic machinery of ancient minds, that acted like an antenna? Then the sky changed. High above, auroras erupted at the equator. Whole constellations disappeared behind bursts of polarized light. Instruments failed globally. Planes grounded, satellites blinked but in the confusion. The hum deepened. Alara's satellite maps lit up dozens of points on the global grid, igniting in sequence. And then, one final unknown location activated. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the lowest known point on Earth, the last lock. They were entering the final phase. The mysterious countdown, once at 25 days, had warped. The AI linguistics interface processed the new data. It wasn't counting time anymore. It was counting resonance. Fluctuating. Waiting. Nearing a threshold. And when it crossed, something would awaken. Alara, Komura said, stepping into the command tent with wide eyes. You need to see this. She pulled up decrypted overlays pulled from every site's projection history. Combined, they formed one massive structure. Not a building, but a field, a torus-shaped energy shell encompassing the planet, designed to stabilize or transport. This was never just about planetary memory. It was not just a message left in stone. It was a resurrection protocol, a machine designed to awaken a sleeping intelligence, or bring back something that had long since left. And if the resonance threshold surpassed 100%, the Earth grid would do more than remember the past. It would restore it. Even if the world wasn't ready. In 36 hours, the resonance was set to peak. The gate would open. The Earth was no longer silent. At 3:03 UTC, the resonance crossed the final threshold. Seismic monitors didn't register an earthquake, yet every ancient monument across the globe vibrated softly at first, then violently as if shuddering awake after a sleep 1,000 centuries deep. No warnings, no alerts. Just a single synchronized pulse across every node in the Earth grid. And then, something impossible happened. The sky rippled. Not clouds, not smoke. The fabric of the atmosphere itself, a shimmer of folding space, like heat over desert sand, blooming in concentric circles around specific points above Giza. Over the eye of the Sahara, above Easter Island, off the coast of Japan, and in the waters of the Mariana Trench. It was the moment. The answer encoded into everything Alara's team had uncovered. And it was no longer a theory. It was happening now. Alara stood aboard the modified research vessel Obsidian Ark, floating above the deepest location on Earth. Their submersible had already descended nearly 7 miles, carrying the final piece, the spiral crystal key linked to the planetary activation mechanism. Her voice was quiet in the comms. Deploy the capsule. Initiate insertion at the trench floor. The ocean swallowed the command. Minutes passed. No signal. Then the capsule responded. Lights. Not electrical. Not man-made. Bioluminescent? No. Glyphs. Symbols written into space. The same language seen in ancient caves and temples now unfurled across the trench in all directions, like an invisible circuit board from Earth's crust to its core glowing softly beneath the ocean. Suddenly, all locations lit up at once. The grid was awake. Connected. And now it spoke. Not in sound but in memory. A cascade of visions struck. Alara and her crew all at once, millennia of thought compressed into seconds, dished out not in words but through feeling, intuition, and imagery. They were the final receivers. They were the rememberers. She saw the truth. Before the younger Dryas, Earth was not ruled by warring tribes and scattered farmers. It was designed. A planetary biosphere managed by custodians from a first civilization born not just from this planet, but seeded from elsewhere, a long-lost world orbiting stars not yet catalogued. They had arrived not to conquer, but to protect. To build a sanctuary. When the sky fire came, comet fragments from a shattered cosmic object. Steered by gravitational manipulation from a now-lost outer planet, they were out of time. Their planetary gate system, days from entrainment, failed to launch. Earth and all its stored knowledge was struck, rather than let the memory die. They encoded it, not on servers, not in fragile texts, but in Earth itself. In frequency, in form, in the structure of consciousness. They knew that thousands of years later, if the cycle repeated, a descendant species engineered with the same neuron-resonant patterns would begin to remember. And if enough aligned, they could activate the return. The gate. Alara's hand trembled as holographic geometry blossomed in the air. Above her console overlapping rings of sound, light, and quantum fluctuation. The resonance field had stabilized. The countdown was complete. And from the trench, light erupted. It shot up, through for miles of pressure, through layers of stone and water, and hit the sky like a pillar of living energy. Satellites recorded massive geomagnetic anomalies. The moon's shadowed object flared a hexagonal array of mirrors opening like an eye. And then, silence. The water calmed. The pulse ended and Earth changed. The sky no longer shimmered with distortion. It shimmered with definition. A second grid now hung in the air, thin as spider silk, visible only at certain angles, outlining something massive. Not technology, not weather, a global construct. Like scaffolding being unveiled. And woven into it were pulses, points of encoded thought, identity, memory. Consciousness. Elra went still. They didn't just store knowledge, she whispered. Komora's voice filled the line, shaky. They stored themselves. The activation of the grid had reconnected the being that was the first civilization, intelligence distributed across stone, sound, water, and time. Not a machine, not a species, a network of memory. A mind waiting to be whole again. Across the world, light curled into spirals above sacred sites, pyramids buzzed, stone heads blinked. The great chamber beneath the Sphinx opened for the first time in recorded history. And in the sky, above Greenland's vault, the atmosphere folded inward like an iris opening, a doorway, not open to something coming in, open for something down here to go out. Alara stared into the heavens as the final message unfurled across all systems. Broadcast in ideas rather than sound, the architects have awoken. The rememberers have answered. We are whole again. The bright flash came not with destruction, but with clarity. Every human on Earth just for 1 second remembered, not in sight, but in instinct, not in logic, but soul, a glimpse of who and what. We are not the inheritors of something older, the continuation of something greater. The seed meant to bloom only when the world was ready. The light faded, peace returned. No invasion, no apocalypse. Just silence. And understanding. All over the globe. People emerged from homes staring at the sky, unable to explain what they just felt. That somehow knowing something hidden had been healed. The Earth grid. The countdown. Gone and the vaults. Closed. Their message delivered. Above it all. That single construct in orbit, the core node, remained silent, watching. Waiting. Not for war. Not for rescue. But for the next civilization. For the next rememberers. And far below, aboard the obsidian ark, Alara looked out across the water. Her voice barely more than a breath. They didn't leave us a warning. She turned toward her team. Her eyes full of tears. They left us. A second chance. End of Volume 1. Genesis 0, a world rediscovered. A history restored. A future. Waiting. Sequel teaser. In orbit, the satellite glints. On Mars, the signal flickers. And on one ruined moon of Saturn, a monument begins to hum. Not in any biological sense, but with rhythm. Pulses, slow and deliberate, echoing beneath the crust of Enceladus, Saturn's icy moon. For 20 years, scientists believed the plumes shooting from its surface were volcanic geysers, evidence of a subsurface ocean. They were right. But they didn't know what else was hiding beneath that frozen sea. A construct, ancient, silent until now. 213 million miles away from the planet that had just reawakened. Alara's voice echoed through the chamber of the obsidian ark too. Now in orbit above Enceladus, she stared, wide-eyed, at the readings coming in. It's the same frequency, she whispered. Earth's resonance signal duplicated out here. Not just similar, identical. Komora's voice came through on a secure channel back on Earth. That's not possible. We hadn't even entered the resonance range until last month. Unless, Alara said, fingers dancing across her data pad. It didn't originate on Earth at all. The walls of the orbiting lab trembled slightly, not from turbulence, but from vibration. The hum, exactly like before. The awakening of the first civilization's planetary grid hadn't been the end of the story. It was only the first activation. A message, a memory. But now, what it had connected to was answering. From space. From here. The pulse from Earth's grid had traveled fast, but not nearly fast enough to explain how Enceladus had already begun responding. Before the signal reached this far, the only explanation? The two were never disconnected. Elara stepped into the observation dome. Below the icy surface, readings from their deep penetration probes showed movement. Not tectonic, not organic. Technological. A lattice hexagonal in some places, circular in others just beneath the frozen ocean. Lights flickering intermittently, forming a grid of their own. Baleem's voice crackled in through open comms from the moon base below. We've confirmed. It's a vault. Almost identical to the one beneath Antarctica, but this one isn't sealed with ice. Pause. It's sealed with time, and then the impossible. The vault opened. Not physically, but emotionally. As if space remembered you. As if memory could travel across stars and whisper itself back into consciousness. Elara collapsed against the wall, heart pounding, mind full of symbols she didn't know she knew. Visions, concepts, echoes, reaching across the void. This was no longer just about Earth, the first civilization the architects had not been native to our world at all. Earth had been an ark, a safe house, a seed vault, a place to begin again. And deep within the vaults of Enceladus, beyond ruined machinery, beneath frozen stars, was a map. Not just of solar systems. Of survival strategies, of escape routes. They had left them everywhere. Cryo-memory imprints, vaults of thought and design, machines crafted to dream until the stars aligned again. And now Enceladus was remembering too. In the far distance from the hidden sea beneath the surface, an orb of light rose, faint and flickering, a messenger. Its code began transmitting before they could even decipher its purpose. It was not for machines. It was for minds. Elara closed her eyes, letting it in. For a moment, she was no longer human, no longer an archaeologist. Not even AIEMEMBERER. She was architect. And through their memory, one truth shattered everything she believed. Earth was not their first safe house. It was their third. And somewhere beyond the Kuiper Belt was the fourth. Alive. Waiting. And calling home. The next journey wasn't toward the past. It was toward the source. Prepare the ark, Elara whispered, eyes glowing with starlight. We're going further than we've ever dared. To be continued. Genesis Omega. The architects returned. The stars were not where they used to be. Or maybe they were, but we had moved. Out here, beyond the boundaries of human maps. Beyond Pluto's frozen exile, the obsidian ark sailed on. Its hull shimmered with the soft glow of exotic particles residue from a corridor through space. That shouldn't exist, but Elara had traveled through it anyway. The vault on Enceladus hadn't just sent a message. It had opened a pathway, a route buried not in space, but in memory. Ancient coordinates only the awakened Earth grid could calculate. And now, light years from the whisper of any sun, Elara's team prepared to make first contact with something older than time. They called it the Cradle. Not a planet, not quite. More like a station frozen into the side of a dead moon orbiting an invisible body. No heat, no atmosphere, and yet readings showed signs of activity inside its dark, mountain-like structures. No human probe had ever reached it, but the architects, they'd left it behind like a lighthouse in the void. Elara, Baleem called from Ops, his voice tense. We've got a geometric anomaly. She looked up. In the large projection globe above the console, the station's surface began to shift not physically, but visually. Portions of its surface patterns reconfigured into shapes. Nested cubes, inverted spirals, golden ratios blazing to life in optical frequencies. Komura activated the resonance translator. It filtered the visuals into language or emotion. Nobody on board quite understood how it worked anymore. It just did. The cradle isn't locked, Komura said, her voice a whisper. It's waiting for the signal. US. Elara approached the central console. She placed her palm on the interface, letting the soft warmth from the embedded architect crystal recognize her quantum signature. The cradle responded. No fanfare. No explosion. Just motion. A panel slid open on the exterior shell of the station, revealing an entrance hovering in a vacuum where no one should survive. But inside the threshold, a shimmering field formed, a corridor of light, pulsing with a beat. Like a heartbeat, Elara murmured, "It's alive, and yet not thinking like we do. Not alive in the way humans understood. It was a memory hive, the final node of the architect network. Here, at the edge of everything, was the last backup of a civilization that had once spread across half a galaxy, then disappeared in a cascade of fire and silence. The cradle was their archive of origins, and it was waking up. Inside, the walls weren't made of matter. They were space folded into itself, metamaterials woven with quantum memory. With every step Elara took, ancient light flickered around her, showing not images, but choices. A map unfolded in her mind. Not a map of space, but of seeding grounds, worlds initiated by the architects. Some failed, some, like Earth, survived. She stopped when she reached the core chamber. At its center floated a sphere, larger than anything they had seen in any Earth vault. Not a data core, a being, or rather, the unfinished shape of one. It wasn't mechanical, not biological, a shimmering lattice of probability shifting through dimensions. A consciousness fragment left behind, not to command, not to control, but to finish one last conversation. And it had been waiting for Elara. Through the resonance field, the thoughts pierced her, gently, like, "Do through glass, you remembered." She didn't speak. She responded with a thought. "We came as far as we could. It was enough." Visions rushed through her. An ancient war, not with a species, but with entropy, planets overloaded with complexity, civilizations spiraling into collapse, and the architects who chose not to dominate but to preserve, encoding their essence into the only material that could survive across time. Memory. They seeded minds, scattered structures on worlds with potential until one was capable of decoding their message. Earth had answered. And now, standing in the cradle, Elara understood her role completely. She was never meant to just remember history. She was meant to carry it forward. "You are not the last," the being said. "You are the first of the next." The chamber pulsed and distant lights emerged. Across the dark, navigation points written in stars. Other eggs, other cradles, other rememberers on other worlds. The architects hadn't vanished. They had dispersed. And now the signal had rippled outward. New memories would awaken. New civilizations would rise from their sleeping. Maps. And Elara Miles, the girl who once held an ancient map in her forgotten library, was now part of something beyond species, beyond galaxy, beyond time. As she turned back toward her watching crew, the ship's lights flickered. A new countdown began. This one not on Earth's surface, or in any machine, but in their bones. Instructions for the next journey already unraveling. New star charts printing. Unknown frequency signatures preparing to sync. Komura smiled with tears in her eyes. "We're not just rememberers anymore." Elara nodded. She stepped to the console and opened the gate. The fabric of the atmosphere itself a shimmer of folding space, like heat over desert sand, blooming in concentric circles around specific points above Giza, over the eye of the Sahara, above Easter Island off the coast of Japan, and in the waters of the Mariana Trench. It was the moment, the answer encoded into everything Elara's team had uncovered, and it was no longer a theory. It was happening now. Elara stood aboard the modified research vessel Obsidian Ark, floating above the deepest location on Earth. Their submersible had already descended nearly 7 miles, carrying the final piece, the spiral crystal key linked to the planetary activation mechanism. Her voice was quiet in the comms. "Deploy the capsule. Initiate insertion at the trench floor." The ocean swallowed the command. Minutes passed. No signal. Then the capsule responded. Lights not electrical, not man-made. Bioluminescent? No. Glyphs, symbols written into space. The same language seen in ancient caves and temples now unfurled across the trench in all directions, like an invisible circuit board from Earth's crust to its core glowing softly beneath the ocean. Suddenly, all locations lit up at once. The grid was awake. Connected. And now it spoke. Not in sound but in memory. A cascade of visions struck. Alara and her crew all at once, millennia of thought compressed into seconds. Dished out not in words but through feeling, intuition, and imagery. They were the final receivers. They were the rememberers. She saw the truth. Before the younger Dryas, Earth was not ruled by warring tribes and scattered farmers. It was designed. A planetary biosphere managed by custodians from a first civilization born not just from this planet, but seeded from elsewhere, a long-lost world orbiting stars not yet catalogued. They had arrived not to conquer, but to protect. To build a sanctuary. When the sky fire came, comet fragments from a shattered cosmic object. Steered by gravitational manipulation from a now lost outer planet, they were out of time. Their planetary gate system, days from entrainment, failed to launch. Earth and all its stored knowledge was struck.